250 people are standing on a beach. They have deeds in their hands, printed deeds, wax seals, street names. They are looking at the jungle where their city is supposed to be. There is no city. There has never been a city. It is March 1823. The ship that brought them has already gone. They came from Scotland, Edinburgh mostly, Glasgow, bankers, farmers, a cobbler, a doctor, whole families. They sold everything they owned to be here. Not swindled out of it. Sold it. Gladly. Queued to do it. They are standing in a mangrove swamp on the coast of what is now Honduras, holding legal title to plots of land in the capital city of St. Joseph. Population of St. Joseph, 0. Buildings in St. Joseph, none. St. Joseph does not exist. The nation of Poyais does not exist. It has never existed, but it has a flag, it has a currency, and they are carrying it. It has a constitution, a parliament, a national bank, an army with regimental colours, and a guidebook you could buy in London for 4 shillings. Everything a country has, except land, except people, except being real. So how do you sell a country that isn't there to 250 people who aren't stupid? You start by not being a liar. 120 to 240, the MA, Gregor MacGregor was real. That is the part everyone gets wrong about this story. They imagine a con man, a drifter with a good coat. He was a decorated soldier, born in Stirlingshire, in the British Army at 16. Then he went to South America and fought in the wars of independence, under Miranda, under Bolivar. Actual campaigns, actual battles. He married Bolivar's cousin. He came back to London in 1821 as a genuine war hero from a continent nobody in Britain understood. And he brought a piece of paper. A grant of land, he said, from King George Frederick Augustus, ruler of the Mosquito Shore. 8 million acres signed over to MacGregor in gratitude. Here is the strangest thing in the whole story. That part was true. There was a king. There was a grant. There was land. Worthless, unfarmable, fever-ridden land handed over by a man who was drunk at the time and had no real authority to hand over anything. MacGregor didn't invent a country out of nothing. He took a real signature on a real document about a real place and built the lie on top of it where it would stand up. And then he did something no conman before him had thought to do. He wrote the guidebook. It came out in 1822. Sketch of the Mosquito Shore, including the territory of Poyais. 350 pages. Written by Thomas Strangeways, captain of the 1st Native Poyais Regiment. Thomas Strangeways did not exist either. Read it now, and it's almost unbearable. It isn't a sales pitch, it's boring. Deliberately, brilliantly boring. It discusses soil composition, rainfall, the quality of the drinking water, which it notes is exceptionally pure. It mentions in passing that chunks of gold occasionally wash down the riverbeds, not as a promise, just as a detail. The way you'd mention a bus route. St. Joseph has paved boulevards, a theatre, an opera house, a domed cathedral. There are already British settlers there, the book says, quite happily established. MacGregor sold land certificates from an office on Threadneedle Street. He sold military commissions in an army with no soldiers. He appointed a man to be the official shoemaker to the Princess of Poyais. He gave interviews. He was received at the Lord Mayor's banquet. Newspapers printed the arrival of the cazique of Poyais as news because it was news. He floated a £200,000 government loan for Poyais on the London Stock Exchange, and it traded. Alongside Peru, alongside Chile. The City of London bought a country's national debt. The country had no citizens. And then, at the docks, he did the cruellest thing in the entire story. He offered to change their money. The settlers were sailing to a new nation. Pound sterling would be no use in Poyais, obviously. Poyais had its own currency, Poyais dollars, printed on proper paper by a real bank printer in Scotland because MacGregor had commissioned them from a real bank printer in Scotland. So they queued up. And they handed over their life savings. Every pound they had left after selling the farm, the house, the tools, the business, exchanged for beautifully engraved banknotes drawn on a bank that did not exist, in a country that did not exist, redeemable nowhere on earth. They were delighted. It felt official. It felt like the last small step into their new life. They carried those notes onto the ship. They carried them onto the beach. Some of them still had them when they died. 2 vessels sailed. The Honduras packet in September 1822, about 70 people. The Kennersley Castle in January 1823, around 200 more. 7 weeks at sea, singing, planning, arguing about which plots were best. The captain of the second ship put them ashore, waited a while, and left. What they found on that shore had been there for a very long time. Ruins, not a city. The rotted remains of a British settlement that had been abandoned decades earlier because the site was unsurvivable. That was it. That was Poyais. Jungle, swamp, mosquitoes. At first, they thought they were in the wrong place. That's the detail that stays with you. They walked the coastline looking for their capital. They assumed a navigational error. The idea that the book had lied was, for several days, less believable than the idea that the ocean was wrong. Then the rains came. Then the malaria came. And the yellow fever. They had no shelter. They had no farms. They had a cobbler with no leather, a banker with no bank, and a princess of Poyais' shoemaker. The doctor died early. After that, there was no doctor. One man, a cobbler from Edinburgh who had sold his shop for this, walked away from the camp and shot himself. They were found by accident. A passing schooner spotted them and carried word to Belize, and a rescue ship came for whoever was still upright. Of roughly 250 who sailed, somewhere near 180 died. The precise figure is still argued over, which tells you something about how little anyone was counting. Fewer than 50 ever saw Britain again. And when the survivors got home, barely alive, ruined, burying their children, a number of them refused to blame Gregor MacGregor. They said he'd been let down, bad agents, poor management. The cazique himself would never have deceived them. Some of them signed statements defending him. Think about that for a moment. The fiction survived the beach. It survived the fever. It outlived the people it killed. MacGregor had already left for France, where he immediately started again. New office, new investors, new shipload of settlers, French this time, bound for Nouvelle-Poyais. The French authorities got suspicious, arrested him and put him on trial. He was acquitted. He came back to London and kept selling Poyais land, on and off, for another decade. Fewer buyers each time. The story wore out slowly, like a coat, and in 1838 he moved to Venezuela, where they remembered him not as the cazique of a fictional country, but as a general who had fought for their independence. They gave him a pension. They gave him citizenship. He died in Caracas in 1845, and they buried him in the cathedral with full military honours, and the President of the Republic walked behind his coffin. The lie was never the flag. It wasn't the currency or the guidebook or the opera house in the jungle. The lie was that it was all so thorough, so detailed, so dull, so bureaucratically complete, that checking it felt rude. Nobody drowns in a story because it's too good to be true. They drown because it's too boring to be a lie.